My dad, Jim Denio, after he got out of the military, came to the Sacramento area, and he was a truck driver. He'd bring produce from the Salinas Valley up to Roseville, and he'd stop in Sacramento going down if he had a load that had to be iced. My mom, after college, worked for the Sacramento Ice Company, and when he would stop in and get ice, he'd of course have to talk to her. As they got to know each other, both of them loved animals. My mom from Lovelock, Nevada, part of the founding family there, and so she was born on the ranch there. She rode horses. Dad, being a truck driver, of course, he hauled during his driving days all sorts of livestock, sheep, everything. And so my mom ended up falling in love with him. I think at first she's sort of wondering, well, I don't know if he would end up being a good husband prospect.
Back in the day, one of our older office buildings, you would go down the hallway of this office, and it was my grandparents' lineage. So on one side of the office, you had my grandmothers. They were astute people in suits that came from, you know, wealth, very, very different than my grandfather's side. So to me, it looked like out of a Western movie, a bunch of horse thieves. And it's funny because when my grandfather would take my dad and my late uncle hunting, and they would all grow these big beards, and it would remind me of that lineage that was down that office hallway. Still amazes me how in the world they got together. I mean, it had to have been true love, because otherwise, just, you know, they say opposites attract. That's could not be more true with my grandma Denio and my grandpa Denio.
And I remember she wrote a letter to my grandmother saying how she met this young man that was a truck driver that she had went out with, and she told my grandma, you know, I think this is the man that I could spend my life with. They were together till he passed in 2000.
What's new at Denio's Farmers Market and Auction? What's new at Denio's this week? What's new at Denio's Farmers Market and Auction? What's new at Denio's? Let's take a peek. Take a peek at Denio's Farmers Market and Auction. Take a peek at Denio's this week.
Open every Saturday and Sunday, rain or shine. Come on out this weekend.
Mom and Dad started the market back in 1947. My dad was a very entrepreneurial person. He had a work ethic that nobody could compete with. At the time, my mom and dad had 5 produce stands in the Sacramento and Placer County area. The most successful one was in Roseville, right across from the livestock auction. He, being an auctioneer, was involved auctioning off livestock and stuff. But my mom at the time ran the produce stand across the street from the livestock auction. They were so successful with the produce stand that people that had brought their merchandise and stuff would ask my dad, hey, I don't want to take it home. Can you sell it for me? And so he would auction it off, and that's where the market ended up being a produce, swap meet, and auction yard.
He had the live auctions, and he'd be out there. He'd sell anything and everything. We were a used car dealer. He'd be out buying cars and selling cars, you know. You never knew what he was gonna find. My dad bought something at one of his auctions one time. They were like military biscuits in great big cans, probably 50 years old. He'd feed them to the horse, and he ate them too. He says, these are pretty good. You know, they're military rations.
Wow. I started working, I want to say roughly about 13, 14. I remember my grandparents being on the cart with their little dog. The reason why I remember Yo-Yo is because I blew a bubble and I guess it popped in his ear, and my grandmother had to like pull a bunch of gum out of his hair. So she wasn't really happy about that, but they would drive around the market with the dog, greeting vendors and talking with the general public. I was very young, with a broom and a pan in my hand, sweeping up garbage, you know, around, you know, the A building. I think so much smaller back then than it is now. One kid can kind of go around a building, just make sure the aisleways were clear. So yeah, I remember them getting out there and just, you know, loving on the customers and loving on the vendors.
So when my brother and I were about 5, 6 years old, my mom would take us out to go visit my dad out at the market when he was working, because he worked weekends. And Pat Vaughn, who was the market manager at the time, would give us $1 or $2 each, and we'd get to go run around and pick a vendor and buy something from them. So I have great memories of that. I got to know a lot of the vendors that way. A lot of them have known me since I was just tiny. My grandparents, I remember them taking us around on carts. On the cart, we'd drive around with them, and they'd, you know, just kind of have us on there. They'd kind of do the same thing. Hey, here's, you know, $1, go find something that you like. And, you know, and I also have good memories of the back lot of the market where Foothills is now. All that was not there. It was just all of our land, and my brother and I would just run around, play. We had a pond back there. We had big gravel piles that we'd run up on. It was a good time.
In the, you know, later 40s, early 50s, you didn't have the Auto Mall. You didn't have the Galleria Mall. You know, way back when it was Birdcage, you know, down Sunrise Boulevard. So Denio's was really a big deal, you know, kind of the one stop area. That's where people would buy their wares, you know, kind of from in day-to-day life on the weekends.
I started in May 1978. I had gone to the unemployment office looking for a job, and she didn't have anything. She chased me out in the parking lot and said, hey, you want to work at the auction? I said, well, what am I going to do there? I don't have anything to sell. Oh no, they have little stands and stuff. I said, okay. So I went out for an interview and started that weekend. Started working in the restaurants, moved on to the beer carts, and that's when we used to drive the beer carts. You know, I'd drive them, and there was speed bumps out there, and there was kegs in the back and the ice, and every time you went over the speed bumps, the kegs got foamier and foamier. By the end of the day, you were selling cups of foam.
So we just want to first start off by thanking Paul and Andy here, owners of Monk Cellar, for collaborating on this with us.
Thank you all for coming out. This was really special to us. We're a Belgian-inspired brewery, but what we're really trying to do is bring some of that to Roseville. Denio's is special to us because it's special to Roseville. Also, my mother worked there for a number of years. It's still great to celebrate 75 years. Congratulations.
My dad, just like when you look at the label and this picture and stuff, he's always known as Big Jim in the community, and maybe on the 100th anniversary, you make one for Big Ken or something.
So yeah, I don't think in my wildest dreams I would have ever thought that we would have a Denio's beer.
I love it. I think it's so cool. It's the Big Jim Denio. The name came to us immediately. The picture that hangs in my office is actually the picture that's on the can.
I remember when we were kind of doing some taste testing, and it's a fantastic lager, a little bit easier, you know, on the aftertaste, and for me that's great. So my grandfather loved beer, and I think if he was alive today, he'd drink a lot of it. I don't say it would be impossible, but there would be a lot of hurdles in this day and age where we're at now to be able to create something like what Denio's is. So, you know, good timing, you know, back when the city was very small, you know, you would go down Douglas Boulevard and you really didn't have anything out there. It was all rural area all the way up to Folsom Lake. He really came into something that was pretty amazing with the strong work ethic that he had, moving the business forward.
My dad, after grammar school, he started working. The best work ethic of anybody that I've ever known in my life. My mom, Marilee, she was a graduate of UCLA in business, and so the only thing they knew about it was to work as hard as they could every day to make it successful. They didn't have any business plan to make it as big as it is today. If you wanted anything in life, you had to work and earn it.
One thing that my grandfather was very, very straightforward about is because you were a family member did not mean by any means that you had any privilege. You being a Denio, you better be setting the example, setting the tone, and that was, always came out of my grandfather. I mean, he was just a very hardworking man.
Probably the one story that sticks in my mind the most, Dad and I were out in the yard, and I was driving one of the golf carts around and had my dad sitting next to me and had his granddaughters in the back. And so we're driving down through the middle of the market, and one of the nieces says, "Uncle Ken, stop. There's a vendor down to the side here that has some toys and stuff," so it hops off, and the other two granddaughters hop off. They get about 20 feet away from the cart. "Hey girls, wait, come over here." So he gives each one of them a $20 bill. And I almost fell out of the cart. And so I sort of look at him, and he just sort of looks ahead. And then he gets a grin on his face and looks over at me and he says, "What?" And I'm there, "Dad, if I asked you for 50 cents, you would say, how are you gonna earn it?" He looked at me and he said, "Son, with them," he says, "I get to enjoy them. And it's up to you guys to make sure that they have a good work ethic."
I mean, he was up at the crack of dawn when he was, in his 60s and 70s. He would still be up super early and work, throughout the whole day. And that's what he enjoyed. He loved to work. I don't think he really thought about making the business necessarily bigger. He just worked so hard that he didn't have a choice but to grow.
This business, it was, my grandma and my grandpa's, and it is something that we are carrying on. It's not ours to say, hey, we want to, do this differently in a way that's going to kind of deconstruct what they started. It's kind of like we're carrying it on. They always come to mind when we make decisions, when we do something like, we brought in entertainment, which was very different from what we did in the early days. And that was something we really kind of had to think about. Is this, something that he would have wanted to do at this time, So we always have that in mind, where our roots, where we come from, where we need to go in order to keep it going, that those are always things.
My dad, if you asked anybody that's worked for him, the toughest but the most fair employer or boss that anyone could have. And it didn't matter how old you were. His expectations were that if he asked you to do something and you were 14 years old or 24 years old, were the same. He treated everybody equally. And sometimes, as all employees think, you know what, that doesn't seem fair, but after you get the job done and you think back about it, he was always right.
I don't want to say I had to tiptoe around him, but you wanted to make sure that you were doggone working when he came around, because if you weren't, he was going to call you on the carpet, and there was going to be a matter of fact that you were going to know whether you were doing what you should have been doing or not. It was his way or the highway. And the employees worked for him, loved him. He was very, very good, helping families that had come in that worked for us for a long time.
What makes the market swap meet successful? Not us, it's the employees that work for us. It's the family business. And when I say family business, it's all the employees and stuff, because that is the family. I've been blessed my whole life that the team that I've had around me has made me successful. I know my dad would say the same thing. All the accolades and stuff need to go to them more so than myself. And that's the honest truth.
It's the people, the team, we really are a team, the family of, even our employees, they're family. It's not just the Denio family, it's all of them. They're part of our family too.
As I got older, realizing really this amazing place that my grandparents had created, you know, that had founded, and how many other families that it has helped over the years. So many extended family members that are part of this company, employees, customers, vendors. I personally always want individuals that show up to the grounds to feel like they are extended family.
From a business standpoint, I've seen a lot of businesses that have struggled, and a lot of it has been because they can't retain employees, and one of the big reasons I've seen is they don't respect the employees. They don't respect what the employees are doing for them. I'm out and about. If I see somebody that's sweeping the grounds and stuff, I'm thinking that person's more important to the success of this business than me sitting up in the office. I have seen too many business people that don't understand that.
Hundreds and hundreds of kids that have worked out there, and we get them every once in a while. We still get somebody that comes back to work, and they worked there 40 years ago, you know.
Well, did you always go along with your dad and agree with him 100%? Any father-son relationship, that there were a lot of times that we would disagree on things, but he was the boss and had the last say. And then as I've gotten older and stuff, I realized that my parents were right. Even all through the disagreements and stuff, we always managed to get the job done, and sometimes I probably caused more problems than I thought he caused to me. Problem is, when you get into conflicts with your parents, it's not the kind of stuff
You don't want to.
yeah, you don't want to. My dad had the ability to, when you talk about, say, pushing someone's buttons and stuff, he could be in a group of people and talking about something, and you knew he was talking to you, and everybody around didn't know that. That's about as much.
No,
how do you diplomatically say?
Yeah, right.
My dad was tough. I mean, he was very tough, but he was fair. He was honestly a person that couldn't come back and tell you that he was sorry for something, but you knew when he was.
You knew what his thoughts were, good or bad. You knew if he was upset. You know, it's not like hiding it and talking behind your back, you know, it's like you knew up front.
Working at the market and in my younger years, you know, I was out there sweeping at 13, 14 years old and working my way up. In my heart of hearts, I always wanted to work with my dad. There were times where I would be frustrated as heck with my grandfather. He's a very strong man, and you know, he had a way with his words. And so there were times where it was like, I'm just done, and you know, I'm not going to do this anymore. But I think I have always had a passion to be part of the family business.
My relationship with my mom was really great because I think our personalities were probably closer than my personality of my dad. I was always more the quiet one. I mean, I enjoyed working more behind the scenes than out front. That was always my strength. My mom was a real good listener. She could listen to us kids, and she was never judgmental. Never jump in, never try to tell me, you know, this is what you need to think about or do. And one time I did ask her about that, and she said, you always knew what needed to be done and you'd do it. And that was the truth.
You know, my grandmother, I think, was a very understanding person. And if you had any questions, you know, financially, honestly, about anything, you know, I think I felt the same way that I could go to my grandmother, but surely my dad would go to her for advice. And I feel the same way in talking with my dad. I think that he understood, you know, that, you know, his dad was a very strong man, World War II vet, sometimes maybe not the easiest person to gather information from. And, you know, no one would hold that against Jim Denio because he earned everything that he's ever owned. And You know, I think he was very proud of what he created with Denio's. But my dad most definitely very soft-spoken. You know, I think he's always been a soft-spoken man, but very knowledgeable. And if I've ever had any questions or anything about life in general, I would want to talk with my dad.
It's very tough for family-owned businesses just to go from the first generation and make it through the second generation. Getting into the third generation a lot of times is even tougher. And being second generation, I'm actually very proud and happy that both of my kids, Eric and Tracie, seeing them take hold of the business and wanting to get involved is really great. As you go through the generations, you always hear the term the good old days, and then the next generation comes up and says, well, you know, we need to change things. And you hit a point in life where it is time for the next generation to start putting their own handprints on a business. And it's always tough to release the reins and stuff to the next generation. I know with my dad, you're in charge, but he always wanted to be there and know exactly what was going on. And I'm the same way with, you know, with my kids. I always want to know what is going on with the business and what they're doing.
You know, my brother and I would have conversations from when we were younger and started working, and my grandfather always said, you know, start at the bottom, work your way up, know the positions. And so as we were doing that, just as summer jobs, and then it turned out to be every weekend, you know, it was a job. And as we were going through school, we would talk and say, hey, it would, you know, be kind of fun to keep this going. And watching our dad work and our grandparents and, you know, all of our, you know, employees that have been there for so long, we wanted to be a part of that team.
So, you know, one thing that I can't appreciate more is my sister and her heart. I'm the older one. I joke a lot about how, you know, she's my older sister, you know, when we're in public settings, and she'll kind of look at me with that, you know, little grin. But I'm 2 years older than her. I think has a very, very good handle on the direction of this business. And I defer to that. You know, I love working with my hands, kind of that guy that's out there that can fix things and have to think things through. You know, she likes to be kind of behind the desk and problem solving and kind of looking at the bigger picture. You know, when we are having just her and I conversations and that family dynamic, we both see to that end result of what is best for the business. You know, you have this phenomenal idea that you think is just going to be, you know, a heavy hitting, amazing thing that's going to be perfect for the business. And then I'll go talk with my sister and it kind of gets deflated, you know, and she gets me thinking a little bit more. And there's been times vice versa where, you know, she'll feel very strong about something and we talk it through. You know, there's been times where I've gotten, you know, a little excited off the handle and said some choice words, and I think I've grown out of that. You know, but the reality is that I love working with my sister.
When it comes to working with family, you have to learn that business is business and family is family, and you leave it at the office. And then, you know, when you go out to dinner, even if you had a bad day, you go out to dinner and they're still your family. And that's something I've learned from a very early age. There's been times where there's been some blowouts, but yet, you know, well, like I said, I mean, I remember times where we would have a family dinner set up, and that day at the office was a day that maybe my dad and I didn't get along so well, or my brother and I, which is rare. We get along really well, but there's been times. But you know what? We've learned that is separate.
Very few businesses make it 75 years under one family ownership. And I definitely would love to see it at 100. Don't know if I'll be around. If I am, I'll definitely be there. One of the things I'm excited about, of course, is to have another generation of Denios involved in the business. It's always hard to let go, but I'm actually sort of looking forward to that as I'm getting older. My kids ask me this, what do you see with the business? And I'll give them the same answer that my dad has given me. It's not what I think at this time. It's what you see as the future, because I'm not going to be here to see what the future of the business is. So it's not up to me to make the business successful in the future. It's up to you, because I'm not going to be here.
75 years this year, and looking into the future, I always kind of jokingly say that's, you know, shoot for another 100 years. Obviously, anybody around here is most likely not going to be here. We have a good thing going, is the way that I see it. We have a wonderful crew. Customer base is phenomenal, and it's growing. So I think with what we're doing, it's definitely working. Kind of what is the next great thing, you know, out there. We'll see what customers desire. I remember, you know, customers wanting more seating. My grandfather was like, nah, they need to be standing up and shopping. So we didn't have those creature comforts. A little different thought process nowadays. We'll see. If it's up to me, I'd love to see this business continue to move forward, you know, for my children and possibly my grandchildren to be able to enjoy the fruits of our labor and others. My oldest daughter is in the Navy, that hasn't necessarily ever shown interest, and we would never put that pressure on them. She's still young, but my 12-year-old does indicate that she would want to get an education and be part of the business. Now we'll see if that possibly changes. You know, as she gets a little bit older, she's not quite in high school yet. I, as a parent, hope that they decide to. I think the same way that my dad was hoping that I would want to be part of the business, that his daughter would want to be part of the business. Having somebody that is part of the family and the lineage, I think is wonderful. I think that speaks volumes. Not easy having that family dynamic, I'll tell you. Sometimes it's very, very rough, and individuals get different ideas, and sometimes that can really, you know, cause a rift in a business that's been around as long as we have.
I really hope so. I mean, I would say absolutely would be my first, you know, answer. Ask me the question again.
Will Denio's always be a family business?
Absolutely. I really think it will. My brother and I have plans. We talk about it. We talk about our own kids coming up into the business. We're very proud of where we come from and what our grandparents, where they came from and what they started, and then all the work that my dad has done and all of these employees that have been around longer than me. I feel like there's so many people that depend on the market as well, you know, whether it's the vendor families, the employees, all of us. I think we really need to keep it going, and I think my brother and I have that vision, the same vision.
Again, I want to, you know, continue to do my best to make Denio's the best place that people can come out and enjoy. You know, they say that Disneyland's the happiest place on earth. I don't know if I believe that. I think it's Denio's.
What's new at Denio's Farmers Market and Swap Meet? What's new at Denio's this week? What's new at Denio's Farmers Market and Swap Meet? What's new at Denio's? Let's take a peek at Denio's Farmers Market and Swap Meet. Take a peek at Denio's this week.
Here's the Denio family.
Thanks for shopping with our family. We've spent 50 years in the same location.
With 3 generations to serve you.
But what about me?
Make that 4 generations.